We move on once again. US President Donald Trump's top envoys have met with European powers and Ukraine in Paris, pushing efforts to end Russia's war in Ukraine. Following the talk, Secretary of State Marco Rubio says US peace framework received encouraging reception. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's office called the talks constructive and positive. Rubio also held a parallel phone conversation with his Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov. In the State Department said again he conveyed Trump's desire to end the war. Reacting to the Paris meeting, Russia described it as a chance for Witkoff, who met Russian President Vladimir Putin for 5 hours last week, to update Europeans on talks about the search for a peace settlement. While the talks were the first substantive in-person talks on Trump's peace push with Europeans. Reports suggest that senior French officials said the country's top negotiators would meet again in the same format in London next week. Before we dive into the discussion, let's listen to what the Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs of France had to say about the meeting.
C'est qu'aujourd'hui à Paris, les États-Unis, l'Ukraine et les Européens se sont retrouvés autour d'une même table pour aborder ensemble la suite des efforts que nous voulons toutes et tous consentir pour arriver au plus vite à un cessez-le-feu en Ukraine, permettant d'engager des discussions vers une paix juste et durable. Et ces discussions très ouvertes, très franches, auront permis de faire avancer la réflexion des Européens, celle des Ukrainiens et celle des Américains, qui se sont donné rendez-vous la semaine prochaine à Londres pour poursuivre les échanges sur cette base-là, afin que nous puissions espérer dans les tout prochains temps aboutir à ce cessez-le-feu plein et entier, sans condition, auquel les Ukrainiens ont d'ores et déjà consenti et auquel nous souhaitons que la Russie puisse consentir à son tour.
We are joined once again by Professor Rohan Gunaratne, Middle East Affairs expert, to discuss this further. Once again, Rohan, thank you very much for joining us. Paris was the first time that Trump's team, Kiev and EU powers sat down together in a room. Does this signal a united front, or is it just a sort of photo op?
Thomas, absolutely, because this is the first time the Europeans and the Americans have seen this issue as a common issue, as a common threat. Previously, the Americans viewed this in a very different way. And of course, the Russians will now, in many ways, be convinced that they have to work with both the Europeans and the Americans. And of course, Trump sent his heavyweights to Paris, and the French president, the French ministers, the French negotiators did a brilliant job, and they are enlisting the support of whole of Europe. That's why the next round of meetings are going to be in Britain. So in many ways, this is a major breakthrough, because the US cannot resolve this problem without the rest of Europe working with them.
Yes, Rohan, Marco Rubio, Secretary of State for the United States, spoke to Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, during the talks. How significant is that direct line? We obviously know that the Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, also has a rather close relationship with Vladimir Putin as well, having visited Moscow personally a few times. So how significant is that direct US-Russia communication line?
Trump and his close team have built a trusted relationship with the Russians. And that is why the United States is central in ending the war in Ukraine. And the way they moved, the shuttle diplomacy, the immediate phone call, all that demonstrates that the war in Ukraine will come to an end, and the Americans understand what is happening. The Americans have also put pressure on Russia. They have still kept Russia under various sanctions. So I believe that we have positive news, a roadmap to move forward.
Professor Gunaratne, Ukraine called the discussions constructive and positive, yet Kiev still demands full territorial integrity. What are the non-negotiables for Zelensky in this deal?
I believe that Zelensky will have to compromise on his initial demands, because negotiation is all about dialogue and compromise. And if there is no compromise, then the war will continue. And of course, Ukraine has paid a very heavy price for this war, and so has Russia. So that itself will compel both these parties to negotiate. The United States will also, in many ways, put pressure on Russia, although many think that Trump will not do that. I personally believe that the Americans are quite tough and hard, although they have demonstrated a very friendly face with the Russians. They will also put Russia under pressure to make sure that both these parties will come to a negotiated settlement.
Professor Rohan Gunaratne, thank you very much for joining us.